I still remember the exact moment I realized they weren't just taking away my pension, they were trying to erase me. My name is Sophie Bennett, and after nearly 3 decades of loyalty, sacrifice, and relentless dedication, I was blindsided in the coldest way possible. The pension I had counted on, the security I thought was guaranteed, was frozen without warning. Just like that, it was a bleak Monday morning when the call came. The voice on the other end was calm, almost clinical, like reading from a script. Due to company restructuring and financial realignment, your pension benefits have been temporarily frozen. Temporarily, a word meant to soften the blow, but it only made the pain sharper. Like a knife twisting slowly in a wound, I sat there, phone trembling in my hand, the room around me suddenly feeling too quiet, too empty. Years of dedication, late nights spent troubleshooting, missed birthdays, and personal sacrifices, all reduced to a cold corporate decision made in some glass tower far away, by people who never knew my name. The betrayal wasn't just financial, it was deeply personal. They didn't just freeze my pension, they froze my future. I thought about the countless times I'd stayed late, fixing problems no one else noticed, the early mornings spent negotiating contracts, the endless meetings where my ideas were ignored or dismissed. I was the backbone of that company, the silent force holding everything together. And now, they wanted to cut me loose like yesterday's news. The CEO, a man who never once looked me in the eye, justified it as necessary for company survival. His words were cold, rehearsed, and utterly devoid of empathy. "We're all making sacrifices," he said, as if my life was just another line item on a spreadsheet. His voice was smooth, but it carried the weight of indifference, the kind that makes you feel invisible. I remember the way his eyes flicked over me, like I was a problem to be solved, a cost to be cut. No recognition of the years I'd poured into the company, no gratitude for the battles I'd fought behind the scenes, just a cold, calculated decision to freeze my pension and silence me. But I wasn't broken. Not yet. I sat back, closed my eyes, and let the anger rise, slow, simmering, and fierce. They thought freezing my pension would silence me. Instead, it lit a fire they never saw coming. Because what they didn't know was that I had a secret, a clause buried deep in my original contract. A founder's clause that protected my pension and shares in ways they never imagined. It was my insurance policy, my last line of defense, a legal weapon forged from years of loyalty and foresight, designed to protect me if the company ever tried to betray me. I remembered the day I signed that contract, fresh out of college, full of hope and ambition. Back then, I was naive enough to believe loyalty was a two-way street, but I was smart enough to insist on that clause, a silent guardian that would one day become my greatest weapon. As the news sank in, I made a decision. I wouldn't be a victim. I wouldn't let them erase me without a fight. I would use every tool at my disposal to make sure they paid for their betrayal. I started by quietly gathering my documents, contracts, emails, pension statements, and the legal clause that was my ace in the hole. I reached out to a trusted lawyer, someone who understood the corporate world's dark underbelly and the power of a well-crafted contract. Together, we began to map out a plan. It wasn't just about reclaiming what was mine. It was about exposing the greed and corruption that had poisoned the company from the inside. I wanted justice, not just for me, but for everyone who had been discarded and forgotten. The days that followed were a blur of meetings, legal filings, and late-night research. I felt a strange mix of fear and exhilaration. Fear of retaliation, of being blacklisted, of losing everything, but also exhilaration at the thought of turning the tables, of using their own rules against them. I won't lie, it wasn't easy. There were moments when doubt crept in, when the weight of the fight felt overwhelming, but every time I thought about giving up, I remembered why I started. I remembered the years of hard work, the sacrifices, the silent battles fought in the shadows, and I remembered the moment they froze my pension, the moment they thought they could break me. That moment became my fuel. If you've ever been betrayed, undervalued, or discarded by those you trusted, you're not alone. Hit that subscribe button and share your story in the comments, because this is just the beginning. I want you to understand just how deep my roots ran in that company. This wasn't just a job for me, it was my life's work. I wasn't some fleeting employee. I was there from the beginning, when the company was nothing more than a handful of dreamers in a cramped office with more hope than resources. I remember the day I walked through those doors for the first time, fresh out of college, full of ambition and determination. I was ready to make my mark. The company was struggling, systems were outdated, processes were chaotic, and the future was uncertain. But I saw potential. I saw a chance to build something lasting. Over the years, I poured everything into that vision. I wasn't just a cog in the machine. I was the architect behind the scenes. I designed the infrastructure that kept the company running, the systems that processed millions of transactions, the security protocols that protected sensitive data, the networks that connected every department seamlessly. I was the silent guardian, the invisible spine holding everything together. But loyalty isn't always rewarded. As the company grew, new leadership arrived, people who didn't understand the foundation I'd built, who saw me as a relic of the past rather than a pillar of the future. They wanted change, disruption, and they wanted it fast. That's when the whispers started. Legacy employee, outdated, redundant, words meant to diminish, to erase the years of hard work and dedication. But I wasn't about to let that happen. Years ago, when I first signed my contract, I insisted on a clause, a founder's clause. It was a safeguard, a promise to myself that if the company ever tried to betray me, I'd have a way to fight back. It protected my pension, my shares, and my legacy. Most people don't read the fine print. Most people don't realize the power hidden in a few carefully chosen words. But I did, and I never forgot. I remember the day I first discovered the clause's true power. It was buried deep in legal jargon, but its meaning was clear. If my pension was tampered with, if my shares were threatened, the company would face consequences far beyond what they imagined. It was my secret weapon, my silent shield. But it wasn't just about the clause, it was about everything I'd sacrificed. The late nights when I missed family dinners, the weekends spent troubleshooting instead of resting, the constant pressure to prove myself in a world that often overlooked women like me. I had given my all, and now they wanted to take it away. But I wasn't powerless. I had the knowledge, the experience, and the legal leverage to fight back. And I was ready. I reached out to a trusted lawyer, someone who understood the corporate battlefield and the nuances of contracts. Together, we crafted a plan, a way to use the founder's clause not just to protect myself, but to expose the greed and corruption that had taken root. It wasn't just about revenge, it was about justice. I spent nights poring over documents, emails, and financial reports. I connected the dots, uncovered hidden agendas, and prepared to strike. The stakes were high. If I failed, I'd lose everything. But if I succeeded, I'd not only reclaim what was mine but also send a message that loyalty and integrity still mattered. I won't pretend it was easy. There were moments of doubt, fear, and exhaustion. But every time I felt overwhelmed, I reminded myself of why I started. This was my legacy, my fight, my story, and I was just getting started. The moment I realized the true power of that founder's clause was like uncovering a hidden weapon buried deep beneath years of corporate dust. It wasn't just a line in a contract, it was a ticking time bomb, a silent guardian waiting for the right moment to ignite. I remember sitting at my kitchen table late one night, the house quiet except for the soft hum of the refrigerator and the occasional creak of the old floorboards. The contract lay open in front of me, the words blurring as exhaustion tugged at my eyelids, but I forced myself to focus. Section 12, subsection C, the founder's clause. It was written in dense legalese, but the meaning was unmistakable. If my pension was frozen or tampered with without cause, the company would be legally obligated to face severe financial penalties, including the immediate release of shares and a forced stock buyback at premium rates. I leaned back, heart pounding. This was more than I'd imagined. This clause wasn't just protection, it was leverage, real, tangible power. But power came with risk. I knew activating this clause would send shockwaves through the company. It would expose their greed, their recklessness, and their betrayal. It would make enemies, powerful ones, and it would put a target on my back. Still, I couldn't let them get away with it. The next days were a whirlwind of research and preparation. I dug through old emails, financial statements, and board meeting minutes. I cross-referenced every detail with the clause's requirements, making sure I had airtight evidence. I reached out to my lawyer, a sharp, no-nonsense woman who had helped me navigate corporate battles before. We talked strategy, how to activate the clause, how to protect myself legally, and how to prepare for the inevitable fallout. Every conversation was a mix of hope and tension. Hope that justice would prevail. Tension because I knew the company wouldn't go down without a fight. I also confided in a few trusted friends, people who had seen the company's dark side but didn't have the courage to speak up. Their support was a lifeline, reminding me I wasn't alone. As the plan took shape, I felt a strange mix of fear and exhilaration. Fear of retaliation, of losing everything. Exhilaration at the thought of turning the tables, of using their own rules against them. I started drafting the legal documents, carefully wording every sentence to leave no room for loopholes. I prepared a detailed report outlining the pension freeze, the clause's activation, and the financial consequences. But I didn't rush. I knew timing was everything. I waited for the right moment, when the company was vulnerable, when the board was distracted, when the CEO was overconfident. And then, I made my move. Before that, though, I want to pause and say this. If you think this is just another revenge story, you're wrong. This is about more than payback. It's about standing up for yourself when the system tries to bury you. It's about knowing your worth and fighting for it, no matter the odds. If you've ever felt powerless or betrayed, keep watching. This story is for you. Asterisk, asterisk, the day I activated the Founder's Clause was the day everything changed, not just for me, but for the entire company. It wasn't a dramatic explosion or a fiery confrontation. No, it was a quiet, calculated strike, a legal and financial earthquake that shook the very foundations of the empire they thought they controlled. I remember sitting at my desk, the weight of the moment pressing down on me like a storm cloud. My fingers hovered over the keyboard, heart pounding, mind racing through every possible outcome. This was it, the moment of truth. With a deep breath, I sent the formal notification to the company's legal department and the board of directors. The email was precise, professional, and devastating. It outlined the pension freeze, cited the Founder's Clause, and detailed the immediate financial consequences, including the forced release of my shares and a mandatory stock buyback at a premium price. I hit send and leaned back, feeling a strange mix of relief and anticipation. I knew the chaos that would follow, but I was ready. Within hours, the company's stock price began to wobble. Investors, blindsided by the sudden legal threat, started selling off shares. Rumors spread like wildfire, whispers of internal turmoil, financial instability, and a Founder's Clause nobody had anticipated. Inside the company, the atmosphere shifted from confident to frantic. The CEO, who had once dismissed me with a smirk, was now pacing the executive floor like a caged animal. His carefully crafted image of control was unraveling before his eyes. I watched from a distance as the board scrambled to contain the damage. Emergency meetings were called, legal teams mobilized, and PR strategies hastily drafted. But it was too late. The Founder's Clause was a ticking time bomb, and I had just lit the fuse. The CEO's panic was palpable. I could almost hear the desperation in his voice during leaked phone calls and internal memos. We need to buy her out now. Contain the fallout. Find a way to reverse this. But the clause was ironclad. There was no reversing it. No negotiating. No shortcuts. Meanwhile, I felt a quiet satisfaction, not because I wanted to destroy the company. I had loved it once, after all, but because I wanted justice. I wanted them to understand the cost of betrayal. The chaos rippled through every department. Financial reports were delayed, client confidence wavered, and internal projects stalled. The company's carefully maintained facade cracked, revealing the rot beneath. And through it all, I remained calm, focused, in control. I wasn't just fighting for myself anymore. I was fighting for every employee who had been overlooked, every sacrifice that had been ignored, every promise that had been broken. The Founder's Clause wasn't just a legal weapon. It was a statement. A declaration that loyalty and integrity still mattered, that you couldn't erase someone who had built the very foundation of your success. As the stock price plummeted and the boardroom chaos intensified, I knew this was just the beginning. The company would never be the same, and neither would I. The dust settled slowly, but when it did, the landscape had changed forever. The company I had once called home was no longer the invincible giant it pretended to be. The stock price had plummeted. The board was in turmoil, and the CEO who had once dismissed me was now a shadow of his former self. But for me, the aftermath was something different. It wasn't about gloating or revenge. It was about justice, the kind that comes quietly, but with undeniable force. I spent those first few days reflecting on everything, the years of hard work, the sacrifices, the betrayals. I thought about the people who had been overlooked, the promises broken, and the silent battles fought behind closed doors, and I realized something important. This wasn't just my victory. It was a victory for anyone who's ever been underestimated, ignored, or discarded. I had stood up, I had fought back, and I had won. But winning didn't mean I was done. It meant I had a responsibility to myself, to my future, and to anyone who might face the same fight. The Founder's Clause had protected me, but it was also a reminder of the power of knowledge and preparation. I had learned that loyalty alone isn't enough. You have to know your worth, understand your rights, and be ready to defend them. In the weeks that followed, I received messages from former colleagues, strangers, and even competitors, people who had faced similar betrayals and found hope in my story. Their words reminded me that I wasn't alone, and that our stories mattered. I also took time to rebuild, not just professionally, but personally. I rediscovered passions I'd set aside, reconnected with loved ones, and allowed myself to heal. And then came a new opportunity. A startup, small but full of promise, reached out. They wanted me to join as a senior advisor to help build something with integrity and vision. It wasn't the giant corporation I'd left behind, but it was a place where I could make a difference on my own terms. I accepted. This new chapter wasn't about revenge. It was about rebirth, about taking the lessons learned and using them to build something better. To anyone watching who feels powerless or betrayed, I want you to know this. You have strength you might not see yet. You have value that no one can take away. And sometimes, the quietest voices make the loudest impact. If this story resonated with you, please like, share, and subscribe. Share your own stories in the comments. Your voice matters. And together, we can turn pain into power. Remember, they may freeze your pension, try to erase your legacy, but they can never take away the fire inside you. Thank you for listening. Until next time, stay strong, stay smart, and keep fighting your battles. Your story might just be the next one I tell.